Hello, my friends. I talk about the acoustic of the room, but before that, I was interested in the sound systems, which include the speakers, electronics, and connecting cables. I've always been interested in sound, and when I earned my first money, I rushed to buy a quality record player from Gabriel. I earned it by working for my father on Saturdays, holidays, or during the Christmas and Easter vacation. I made tooling deliveries on a Solex all over the southern suburbs and later in Deux Chevaux. I also worked on the sharpening machines with diamond grinding wheels that sent sparks flying with a lot of noise. I wasn't worried about my future, as it seems to be all mapped out in the company that was starting to develop. I acquired loudspeakers that seemed to be of good quality until I met a young boy, Alain Gabriel, who was very familiar with high-level hi-fi. He advised me to buy better speakers and sold several of my animated electronic music paintings. One day, in 1982, I made the first public presentation of one of my electronic paintings, Connection, in the now defunct theater next to the bowling alley in the acclimatation garden. For the occasion, I had been loaned some horn speakers which did not prove to be satisfactory. The next day, in the car that won the equipment, the technician Wally talked to me about the possibility of transforming the 4 speakers I had into a big system that should be more efficient. We agreed on the price he was asking me, and he started the modification, then disappeared. For months, I had to chase after him to get him to go ahead with what I had ordered. I was exasperated by this boy who broke his promises and left my speakers hanging. After a year, he told me that he could not go on anymore and introduced me to one of his friends who had to finish the job. But whoever looks like him gets together, and for another year I was on the edge. All this time I have been watching how the inside of an enclosure is made, and I thought I could do it on my own. I set out on an adventure and started making huge speakers under the influence of Wally, who had pushed me in an unrealistic direction. I have built many systems to learn how to achieve a sound that is fully satisfying to me. To finance myself, I sold them as I went along to less demanding friends. I came up with bigger and bigger loudspeakers, using 11 speakers per speaker, and I even went as far as multi-amplified speakers that use 1 amp per speaker. To be able to adjust them, I went all the way to the Swiss border to buy a 5-way filter, extremely rare. To adjust this 1800 watt set, I bought a sound spectrum analyzer with a microphone to measure the frequencies. A sound, white noise or pink noise, was being emitted that made a kind of sound. But very quickly, I realized that none of the settings that were good for the measuring was satisfactory for listening, and I decided to use only my much more precise headers. For years, I used to immerse myself in total darkness in order to have a finer perception of sound, sitting in the middle of the room and around 6:30 p.m., the time when my listening is the most sensitive. Very quickly, I felt like dressing up these big boxes and transforming them into female and male characters. Wanting to push to the maximum the reasonableness with a character, I went to find a friend whose physical proportions corresponded, and I realized the Amazons, which used only one amplifier, which gave a better result. They were very impressive, especially since they were accompanied by the army of butterflies. There were 4 speakers with butterfly wings hung from the ceiling that worked with device giving a very spectacular spatial sound, but unbearable after a long hearing. Since I was never fully satisfied with the listening experience, I brought and then built up to 14 small pairs of different speakers, not to mention the cable I was experimenting with. I could have felt it at that, but I made a meeting and also a listening which directed my research in another direction, which I will speak to you about in a future episode. Coming back to my destiny. After 2 years in boiler making, I realized that it was not the right direction to work with my father, and also that intellectually it was not enough. My father agreed, so I went back to Courbevoie in the Vauban Technical High School, which is now gone. I had left the third one and was starting up again in the second one, with 2 years apparently lost, but with a training that proved to be fundamental for the research I was going to undertake. Since I don't like being in class very much, I skipped classes quite often in the company of a friend who was also called Alain. He was passionate about sports cars and parked not very discreetly right in front of the school. We used to go together, he to go to the mechanics and I to study quietly at home. During this period, I joined a rugby team in Puteaux. It's the only sport I enjoy. I was considered a good player because I scored the most tries that year. The first time, I moved a meniscus in my right knee. Then, when we got to the final of a competition, as we were in single file on the field, I fell into a root and sprained my left foot. I was wearing jersey number 13. Afterwards, tired of being covered in blue every Monday morning, I gave up sports. Previously, at the age of 14, I had practiced competitive gymnastics in the team of Courbevoie, then champion of France with honorable results. When I took my baccalaureate at the Mountain High School, Alain was sitting right behind me. Because of all the classes we had skipped, we were badly considered in high school. Yet, we both passed and I even got a fairly good grade. After reading the results, I went to a cafe next door to tell my parents. Several students were waiting to call. And yes, we didn't have a cell phone. There, I met a girl who changed my life. Destiny. Dominique was a little older than me and had more life experience. In particular, she had architect's bodies and planted a scene in my head by telling me about it. But above all, she made me know after a difficult beginning, so much my shyness blocked me, the joys of physical love by defloring me. I tell you next time what happened next.